in chat as we go. Sean, if you can just keep us up to date with who's...
She's on her way.
Okay, that's fine. Not a strain. I see her coming on now.
So again, keep you up to date with?
What other questions are coming out on the
Okay.
on the other? Hello, Candy. Good morning, Candice. Are you with us?
Almost.
Almost.
How's it?
Hello, Candy.
Hey.
Others are joining as we go. Hello, everybody. Nice to have you joining us. We're trying a slightly different way of doing the live stream this morning. We're opening it up a bit more broadly on Zoom. So if I don't recognize your name, you won't get added to the Zoom meeting. We hopefully shouldn't have any crazies wanting to join us. But I see a number of folk joining us on that. So for those that are joining online and for those who are signing in on Zoom itself, this is obviously a platform we want to interact with people. I think I don't know about you guys, Sean, Grant, Candice, but I think we're all desperately missing connection and, you know, trying to feel like we're belonging to a church. And I don't think Zoom quite cuts it, but it's the best version we have at the moment. And so we'll try and we're trying to create some sense of a community. I don't know, Grant, have you heard any changes to the government legislation as to when we may or may not see any changes regarding churches?
No, not a word. I've been following, obviously, as most of us do, following the media quite closely, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I've not seen anything either, so we'll have to work with that. I think there's a lot of people that are quite desperate to go back to church. I think my concern is we're going to go back and we're going to all be 2 meters apart and not singing and all have face masks on. And I think it may be slightly less than than overwhelming. I don't think it's quite going to match what our expectations are. I think it's like going to the shops with this idea you're going to buy this nice product and you find it. And it's not, you get it in the box and it's like disappointing. I suspect going back to worship may well be something similar to that. So we'll take it as it comes. We'll just keep our eyes open. So again, just to all of those joining us the live stream and those joining us on Zoom itself, those signing in directly on Zoom, if you can just keep yourselves on mute unless you want to ask a question, then happy that you drop in, and it may be a little messy and we're quite happy with that. And so this is an opportunity to do 2 things. I think one is just to engage a little bit more around some of the stuff that came up during the sermon. And I think that's really helpful, and to engage those questions. And then obviously to try and kind of get some sense of where we are as a church. And part of that, we'd love to pray with you guys. We've not had a great deal of people actually asking for prayer requests, but I suspect we all need that. I think a lot of families, as Grant and I listened over this last week, are really struggling in a bunch of ways. We're aware that there are financial issues for some families, but also just I think everyone is just struggling. I think emotionally this has been a tougher season than I think we. So again, for those. Just on live stream, if you can just keep your phones muted until we actually, unless you want to add a question or interject, then you're welcome to unmute. So Grant, I mean, I think you spoke really well this morning. I know you were a bit worried about sometimes the Sunday doesn't always doesn't translate well, and you try to be a bit more animated, I guess you said, but I think it came across really well and just a really clear message. So, I mean, you speak about these 2 thieves that Tertullian spoke about, Grant. This kind of, on one hand, this sort of like free for all, I guess. We can do whatever we want as long as we're loving. You know, that's all we really need to do. And then on the other hand, this kind of deep legalism. What do you think we struggle with most as a community, Grant? Do you see a particular trend in Protea Valley in the sort of broader area that we serve?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on it before the service this morning. It's tough to do generalizations. I think we're always in danger of getting it wrong in that way. But I do suspect that if I stood up on a Sunday and sort of asked a few questions and said, for example, how many of you feel you're not praying enough? I think a whole bunch of people would put up their hands.
Yes.
If you asked, how many of you feel you need to read scripture more? I think just about everyone will put their hands up. And so I think we probably do have a tendency more towards, sort of that thief on the cross where, where we feel we need to be doing stuff in order to connect more with Christ. Now, of course, one has to balance it out that we do need to pray and we do need to read scripture and we do need to do a whole bunch of stuff. But I think that we probably are more rules oriented. I know I definitely am more inclined to try and do the right stuff in order to connect with Jesus. So yeah, I suspect that would be the case. Of course, you're always going to get people who are more love orientated than truth orientated. I think those would be the group of people that sort of really have this belief that you just need to be good in order to connect with God. And of course, there would be also that group of people. My suspicion is those often tend to be more people outside of a community of faith, so they may call themselves Christians, but they're not connected in community. I suspect they would be the ones that would be more saying, listen, I just need to be good. I just need to love people. Love is the golden rule. If you're following that golden rule, you're sorted. You're okay. Anyway, that would be my perception of the situation. I'm not sure how others would think.
I sometimes wonder whether there's not a deeper hypocrisy in us, Grant, where when I'm doing things wrong, I then want the rule to then be the love rule. But when I'm doing things right, then I'm quite happy to be the moralist. I suspect that we're a little more flexible, perhaps.
No, that's true.
Probably a little hypocritical in that. I mean, one of the things, Grant, that we've really worked quite hard at, and I think want to keep working really hard at. Sorry, by the way, if you're online on any of our online platforms, please do on WhatsApp or on the platforms post questions or ask for prayer requests. And if you're in with us on the Zoom, you're welcome to unmute yourself and pipe in and ask a question. If you interrupt, that's fine. We can manage. If you're not talking, just keep your phone on or your device on mute. Grant, so we've been pushing a lot into community, and I mean, for those listening, one of the things we realize when we come out of lockdown, I think, is going to be a hunger for community, and probably we think a little bit of a reticence for some certainly to meet in bigger communities like Life Group. And so we're going to push really hard into our connect groups, which are, much smaller, uni-gendered kind of things. Just talk a little bit, Grant, in terms of the flavoring of the gospel, stopping yourself falling off, either end of those spectrums, either into moralism or into this kind of liberalism. How does community shape? How important is community, I guess, in shaping those gospel values in us?
I don't think we really realize how important it is. I think we pay lip service to community often. We say it's important to be in community. The Bible has lots of one another passages. The whole theme of both Old and New Testament, is community. I think we know all those things. I think we're also perhaps aware that heaven is just a giant community. The picture we get of heaven is of this massive people all worshipping before the throne. And so there's this constant theme of community. But I think it's far more important than we realize for a couple of reasons. I think the one is that community shapes culture. So we all live in the world, and the world we live in has a certain cultural theme to it. But the fact is, Christian community also has a culture to it. And so when we find ourselves in Christian community, we find that particular culture shaping the larger culture in us. And so I think we can't overstate how important it is for us to be connecting with other believers in this way. And there might be some people who are, joining us who are not normally part of Prairie Valley, who normally don't go to church. And if they are listening to in this now, I'm hoping that they're hearing what we're saying. When you join Christian community, you're finding yourself in a particular environment that shapes what you believe and what you think. It shapes your Christian culture, and that's so important. I think there's a second part to that that's essential, and that is that we look at other people's lives. Now, we all get it right at times, we all get it wrong at times, but there's a sense that when in community, we're observing how other people are living out their faith. And when I'm down and really discouraged and really struggling, I'm kind of connecting with someone else who's maybe in a better place, and they're uplifting me, and they're giving me an example to look up to watch and to emulate. And I might be the one down at the moment, and you're just picking me up, or the role switches around at other stages. And so I think we really do need that. And then there's another component that is important, and that's the accountability side. And so if I know that any of the people that I relate to in the community are struggling, I'm going to be phoning them. I'm going to be asking how they're doing. I'm going to be perhaps praying with them. I'm meeting with them in person. I'm supporting them. I'm making sure that they don't slide off the end of the precipice as they maybe feel that they're hanging there. So that sort of accountability side, I think, is absolutely essential.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, I think sometimes it's a little bit like a gym, perhaps. You might be the legs guy and I might be the arms guy. And if we just go to gym on our own, we tend to get stronger in those areas, which is good. I mean, we want to be, but I think we'll end up being then weaker in others. And so when you go to gym together, I kind of point out, you're being lazy on your upper body, and you point out I'm being lazy on my legs, and we kind of then work each other up to a much stronger place. And so I think God doesn't want us to be doing this thing alone. I think it's part of the design inherent in the creation. I mean, right at the very beginning, God looks at Adam and says it's not good for him to be alone. He needs a partner to work with him in this. And so I think that's a profoundly important part that I think I'm not sure those that are not in community understand how important community is. I remember when I first came to the church, we were part of a community here and hadn't been for some time because, there weren't a lot of life groups when we started. We eventually started one. I remember kind of leaving one night thinking, geez, I've really missed this. I've missed the connection and I've missed the accountability. And it forces me to rethink the gospel, reframe the gospel the whole time. Candice, I want to talk to you a little bit, Candice. So, I mean, a couple of years ago, Grant and I mentioned this some weeks back, we'd been to a Dallas Willard conference. And one of the lines that Dallas Willard has that I think is really helpful, he says, we are saved by faith and not by works, but we're not saved by faith without works, which I really like. So I just thought maybe just talk a little bit about what's happening in and around the church, Candice, in terms of just some of the missions and outreach stuff that's been happening over the last months. May just be helpful to hear from somebody who manages that whole ministry. And just, how do we live? We want to live our faith out, I guess. We want to be practical. It's one thing to say I love you, but just talk a little bit about how the church has been doing on that, Candice.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. I think what resonated with me in Grant's sermon was that partnership with God. And I think that, it's not, we don't have works in order to get God's love or, to get justification in some way, but through his grace, we're allowed to partner with him. He's always, from the beginning of time, from Abraham's time, he's blessed people through people. And as a church, we are blessed with many resources and many talents. And by God's grace, we are able to use those to be blessed by God. So being able to be on partnership with him and, bring his kingdom to bear is a blessing for us. But through that, we're also able to show people love. And I mean, just the work we've been doing on COVID, being able to give people relief through the food packages. It's a way we can show God's love to other people, where we can, bless, or God can bless others through us, which is a huge blessing for us as well. So that's what we've been doing at the moment, and continuing the work on the farms, just partnering with people, having relationships with people that we wouldn't otherwise, it's not the normal person you would invite around for dinner or be connected with in your circle of friends. So it's a real opportunity to have deep connections with people from other walks of life, who perhaps need some encouragement, some hope, which God gives to them through us, which is a real awesome opportunity. And some of the other things we've been involved with, trying to set up this foster home and all the bureaucracy involved. But it's also a blessing to know that, God cares about the most vulnerable, cares about the children who, have got a difficult start in life. And we get to, their lives in some small or big way.
I mean, do you think there's, I think we're a community, Candice, with huge amount of means. For those that don't know, the elders put aside about R500,000 out of church reserves towards immediate relief for some of the practicalities. And on top of that, Candice, I haven't seen the latest figures, but I don't even think we're halfway through that money because people have been so generous in so many ways. So there's I think we have a lot of resources. But do you think there's a danger for us, I mean, to what Grant was speaking about, that we sort of almost begin to trust perhaps our good deeds in some way? Do you see that as a risk?
Absolutely. I think, as you say, particularly in a well-resourced community, we in a way don't have to rely on or live with God's provision only. We think it's our provision. I think we've worked hard, we've got a lot of things, and therefore it's us that's doing it. We forget that it's God that's given us those talents. It's God's provision in its totality. So I think there is a huge risk in that. I think there's also a risk in, we're quite in a achieving, success-driven community, that somehow God's love is also something that, we've achieved, that we've done things in order to get his love, in order to be a good Christian, in inverted commas. I think it's a huge risk. I think when I interact with the poorer communities, the communities with less material things, their faith is raw, it's real, and we can learn a lot from that. So, you need to press into God and have a real relationship with Jesus just to survive from one day to the next, emotionally and materially. I agree. I think it's a huge risk.
I think we're seeing just in a slight thing change. We saw, the poor people. What we've noticed in the last season is obviously with some of our families now beginning to lose incomes. I think for many poor people, that sense of uncertainty and having to trust God every day is a very practical reality. I get up this morning and whether I've got a job or not there's no guarantee. And for us wealthier people, I don't think we're used to that. And all of a sudden, you've lost 50% of income, or possibly all, because you've lost the job. And I think a lot of families are really, really struggling. I don't know how one, I don't know how one counters that, but I think that it presses the gospel in, because it suddenly becomes very real in terms of having to trust God in the here and now, which maybe I don't ordinarily have to do.
Yeah, I think it also touches people's identity. They have this sort of identity crisis of, I was once the provider and now I'm no longer the provider. In reality, it was always God being the provider. But I think in the poor communities, you see that erosion of your identity. You don't feel valuable anymore. You feel, there's some sort of worth that's been eroded from you. So I think it's important for us to encourage one another, that we're, as Brent mentioned about being bold, we are immensely loved. We're made in the image of God, and we are valuable to him, no matter what we have or don't have. I think during this season, it's important just to remind ourselves and one another that we are deeply loved and valuable.
Yeah, I think it goes back to Grant. I think it goes back to your sermon. I think we probably tend more so in this area to be quite legalistic in some sense, and I think we do put a lot of our value into who we are and what we've achieved, and I think we do that gospelly as well. And it's a real struggle for us. It is genuinely a big struggle. For those that are on the Zoom call with us, I would love if you want to ask some questions or engage with anybody. I mean, I think we wanted to sort of experiment a bit and see what it's like to have a slightly more free-for-all discussion, and perhaps help us create a little community. Maybe just as we start off and opening it up a bit more broadly, I've got a private message from somebody in the church who says, how can we justify or condone meeting with people who are not part of your immediate family when the law says you're not allowed to do so? So come on, Grant, I'm going to put this one in your court. She says, I'm battling with how so many followers of Jesus are disobeying the country's law, even though we're called to do that.
Yeah, look, it's one for individual conscience. I think, for myself and my family, my boys, it's been difficult for them because, all their friends, as that person commented, are hanging out and socializing. And I'm kind of saying, guys, you don't get to choose which rules you obey. It may seem illogical. You might think that you're, in the lowest threat group, but the point is that's just, that's the government's directive, and we need to honor them even if it doesn't make sense. So I mean, that's how I've tried to lead my own family. But at the end of the day, I think the point is we all have to be able to answer for ourselves. I don't want to say I think much more than that. I don't know if there's anyone else on the group. I'd love to see more faces. There's quite a few people here. I just see names. I'd love to see more faces. I think the great thing about.
I'd like to hear Lazan answer this one. Thanks, Lazan, for your testimony. I think as a survivor, which we get to call you now. I'd love to hear your take on this, and as a medical doctor, come on. You'd have to unmute yourself, Lazan. I don't know if I can unmute you.
Sorry, I was scared you're going to do that. The problem with, I think a lot of people are getting very irritated and tired of not meeting with family and friends. And there's a sense of loss and more, and people are venturing out more and risking more. So that's definitely happening. That from a medical perspective, I think that what Grant has said is that you need to not to be stupid. But I think there's a sense where grandparents need to see their grandkids, even if it's at a distance, or just to so I think sort of to I don't think it's something that you must just disregard all the rules, but I think there's certain situations where it is important to actually just seeing each other. So I have actually told people to do that.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't know what the right answer is, and I think there are two gospel components for me. I mean, I think the one part is just about protecting other people from me. You know, I don't know where. You know, I could come see you, Lazan, pastorally, and you know, the next thing pick up something from you, and I go to another family, and all of a sudden they're infected. And I think, you know, there is a gospel part of protecting others. I think there's a second gospel part. You know, I think there's a point when I think we must break the country's laws when they're unjust and cruel, and at that point I think it becomes a very powerful testimony of the church. But I'm not sure this is that time. I mean, I understand the personal desire to break the laws, and I'm not suggesting. I mean, I think we all feel that, but I think we may shoot ourselves in the foot somewhat by claiming to follow Christ and then, you know, doing a free for all. I think you lose the credibility to speak powerfully when you need to. And there are times, I think, when we need to speak powerfully as the church to our friends or to our family members. But I think we may lose that credibility almost by flaunting the laws too easily now. Because I hear all my neighbors are having parties and socializing and whatever else. It's been, I get quite jealous, I have to confess. Derek writes, he's also, everyone's tired of physical separation, but the virus doesn't get tired. There's
a good comment.
I just want to correct myself. Yeah, it's not. I mean, I'm still obeying the rules and urging people to do that. And I think it's definitely not a free for all. And yeah, I stand corrected in the sense that as a Christian we need to follow the rules as the country says. But yeah, so thank you for that.
It's very difficult. I mean, I think we as elders had a long chat the other night because, you know, I think both Grant and I are feeling very disconnected from the church in some sense. Part of the reason we're doing this meeting like this, and you know, we want to do more pastoral visiting, especially for those who are struggling, because you know, I think we're seeing a lot of mental health issues coming up at the moment. People the anxiety is huge. Depression, I think, is creeping in. Sleeping, I don't like, almost nobody is sleeping well in the season. And I think it's all got to do with just how this thing is affecting us. And I think we forget, again, Grant, to go back to your comment on community earlier, I think we forget how important community is. So we're trying to visit people, but we're also realizing that we've got to do this well and, you know, keep our distance and keep all the social distancing and sanitizing and mask measures in place. But it's so difficult because I think we're all feeling quite isolated in many ways. I don't know if others have got anything to add to that, or any further questions perhaps to engage us with.
Maybe I can just to reiterate from earlier, just I thought Lazan's testimony again for the second time was brilliant, and such a unique point of view, obviously now going through it. And I think that was really key, just to see someone from our community who's gone through it, really open about it, even talking about fear of death and stuff, but then also just bringing the hope of Jesus in. So I just, Luzon, thanks a lot for that. And I think going forward, we're probably going to need, I think, testimonies like that of people who are struggling and relying on Jesus are going to be quite crucial. So yeah, I'd love to see more of those.
I'd like to just say something. Our daughter, the whole family had COVID. And yes, it's not a good experience. But last week on Sunday, we did the Father's Day thing with the whole family. And then during the week, my grandson developed a sore throat. And immediately, I just thought, with who did we have contact? Where did we go? Fortunately, it is not COVID, but you just realize this is not a thing to play with. But a wonderful thing that came out of our family's experience of COVID is, I see with my daughter, she's a healthcare worker as well, but the compassion that she's working with the patients and the help that she gives when she goes into the wards, because the nurses are so tired. They, to work for, I'm sure Luzon will know how tiring this is. And what she does for her patients, it's amazing. I mean, how will people know God's love if we don't become his hands and feet? And I realize that God is giving us an opportunity. I see with my daughter, whenever she hears of somebody with COVID, she drives off, she gives meals, and for her herself, after a few days, she said to me, "Mom, my fridge is so full, I don't know what to do with the stuff," because the home cell supported her in an extraordinary way. So yes, I want to see this as a God is giving us a chance to take care of each other, but I do know that we must be so careful. Just one day of disobeying the law can have huge consequences, because if I think where we went during this week, the shops and whatever, it is as if you start thinking, oh my word, what did I do? So yes, we are at home now and we will not go visiting. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks. That's yeah, I hear you on that. But we're young and we're fit, and it won't happen to us. That's I hear that one happening quite often. I think the one genuine concern, though, just to add, that I do hear, and I think this is a very valid one for me. I mean, all the research I'm seeing suggests that this illness is going to be with us for a long time. Unless a vaccine gets found in the next couple of months, the reality is we're going to be dealing with this on and off, in the years to come. And so at some point, like, how long do we have to stay social distance for? And I hear, I mean, especially there are a number of our congregation who are single people, and for them already it's a really anxious time, simply because they really are feeling disconnected. They're working from home, they're not working in an office anymore, they've got no family to share the time with, and I think there's a huge measure of anxiety. And I hope that at some point there's some opportunity that the government begins to open the doors slightly. I think there's a mental health issue. I mean, I think, like I say, in the beginning, God designed us to work together, not apart, and people are struggling a lot with that. Any others got any comments, any questions, anything else you want us to engage on? This is an open agenda forum here. You're welcome to ask anything you like.
I just want to say from my side, all the people involved in the church and the music, and especially the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the songs, when we were right into lockdown, it was the same songs and the same people and the same clothes and so forth. But I must say there's definitely a different flavor to it. So thank you so much, guys. I know it's hard work behind the scenes. Thank you so much for having us up and running every Sunday. Patty and I, we sit here, we watch you guys, we miss you. I've got parcels in my bucket, which I must drop off tomorrow. Yeah, the COVID is affecting all of us. We've got 11 staff members and 4 of them were positive. So we've been in isolation now for 3 weeks and we will return to office tomorrow.
No, thanks. I think the team has put a huge amount of work in. It was nice seeing different band playing and different background. My kids were like, "Yay! It's not the same background." And having some different music, and yeah, the teams have put a lot of work in. So it's been good. Hey, Martin, you want to say something?
Yeah, just quite interesting going back. At the start of COVID, I read an article where the author basically said eventually what's going to happen is COVID won't seem the threat, and not being able to do what we normally do will become the threat. So he gave an example of a single mother in a small apartment with 2 children. Eventually that becomes more of the threat than COVID. So, and as we've gone into this thing, I think we've all felt it. We got tired of certain rules and we want to buck the trend, and it's something I'm agreeing with Grant here, where we're going into a time where we're starting to peak and we need to be more careful than we before, but we're in a period where we're actually tired of the rules. So again, and I think we need to be careful, and what everybody's saying, I quite agree with that. But from a pastoral perspective, I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. I mean, I'm sitting in Paul, and this actually worked for me. You know, I'm sitting here talking to you. So I think I reiterate what you said now. You know, what you guys are doing are wonderful, and I reiterate, I just think we need to be even more careful at the moment. Things are going to change. We're going to have to live with it, as you mentioned, you know, whether vaccines found or not. And I think just be careful in the time when we're starting to tire of the situation.
No, that's helpful. I think also, Martin, to add to that, I mean, what I see in wealthier communities, this is kind of what I hear amongst my friends is, I don't like some of the government rules, and some of them don't make a lot of sense. So I'm not going to obey any of them. I mean, they don't articulate it quite in that way, but I think it is that response. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. And especially for young people, my young adults life group, I mean, many of them are not using any, you know, they don't sanitize, they don't wear face masks. So it's sort of like, it hasn't perhaps hit close enough to home for some people. You know, Lizanne talking just now, or, you know, Hein, you mentioned 4 of your staff have been ill. I think when it starts hitting really close to home, I think we'll start self-isolating and managing, because I think the fear at some point might set in, but it hasn't yet. I think we are getting blasé, and I think you're absolutely right, tired of the rules. So if questions come in on one of our forums, somebody says, does God give and take life? Surely our life is therefore his, and if we are to die, it's because it's his will. So surely we should also be acting responsibly, but without fear and extremist behavior. And I think that's where we need to come out at. Somebody once said, you work as if it depends on you, and then sleep as if it all depends on God. And that was a really helpful line. So, you know, I think, you know, you try and do everything you can, but then you put it into the hands of God and you realize it's up to him to deal with the nitty gritty, because I don't think we're supposed to live in a spirit of fear. And I think that is, you know, I think that's a driver in a lot of us. You know, I think it's the fear of missing out that we want to connect with friends, and the fear of being lonely, we want to connect with people. And then I do know that there are some in the congregation on the other side of the spectrum who are very anxious. And, you know, we have to respect each other's opinions, I think, and respond gently and graciously to each other. But it's going to become more difficult as time goes on. Anyone else got anything they want to add? Any other comments? Any other questions? Any other prayer requests? Grant should still be on. Grant, I'm going to ask you to wind up for us. If you can maybe make a final comment and then close us off in prayer, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think everyone's shared quite clearly. Thanks for everyone who's participated in the service. You know, I think the questions and the line of questioning has highlighted community again. It's felt like it's been a bit of a theme, even though we're talking about grace. It's really, a lot of it has pointed back to community over the last 3 weeks. So I just want to encourage everyone, meet us life groups, meet us connect groups. If you're someone who is not in a life group or connect group, please make contact with us via different platforms. And even though for the next while anyway, it's going to be online, and I know we hate it, I think let's try and keep connecting with each other as best as we can. Cool, let's pray together. Father, it's just a beautiful expression of community again. Just seeing all the faces on the Zoom call has done my heart good. Thank you for all these precious people. Thank you for the multitudes of faceless people out there who've just watched the service and perhaps aren't even in the live stream at the moment. Thank you for Prairie Valley Church and its people, Lord. I just want to ask you to bless everyone, watch over them, continue to reveal yourself to them. I pray particularly for those who are struggling and vulnerable at the moment. I pray particularly for those who are lonely, those who are sick, those who are elderly and feeling isolated, those who are feeling isolated from their family members. Thank you that you are nearer than ever, Jesus. And I pray that that sense of your presence would actually become tangible for them this week. That's my greatest prayer of all, that people this week would just know that God loves them and that God is with them. And so thank you for this precious time. Watch over your church and its people. And we look forward to connecting together next Sunday. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Cool. Well, bless you all. Thanks all for contributing. Thanks all for being around. For those that are online watching, have a blessed week, and we will touch sides with you next week. Please remember, Grant, myself, and the elders and our care counseling team are available. Don't be too proud to ask for help. We are here to journey with you, and no one should be going through this alone. So please do contact us. Just go to our website. All the details are there on how to connect, how to serve, how to find help if you are in need of it. And so please do join us for that.
Thanks,
cool.
everyone.
Have a lucky day.
Ciao.